Hello, welcome to Full Circle. I'm Suzanne McAllister. You know, there are so many activities to do in downtown Indianapolis and especially along the canal. In fact, you can actually go for a ride in a gondola. In our music segment today, we will have gondolier Gofredo perform. But also another wonderful treasure along the downtown canal is the Indiana State Museum. Today we are going to be featuring their new exhibit called The Ice Age Giants, Mysteries of Mammoths and Mastodons. Here to start off our conversation about the Indiana State Museum is our first guest. I'd like to welcome Ron Richards, who is the Senior Research Curator of Paleobiology. It's great to have you here today.
It's real easy to be here too. Thank you very much.
Tell me what paleobiology is all about.
It's biology of the past. Well, everybody sort of understands biology, but what we have to do with paleobiology is dig up the evidence. We've got to dig up the bones and the way they occur and look at pollen and all this and see really what the animals were like, what the environments were like. So biology of the past and all the environments with it.
So what's the most difficult part about your job?
That actually is a tough question. There are so many components of the job because we are in the field, we are in the lab, we're dealing with contract, we're doing exhibits, we're doing programs. I don't really ever think anything's difficult. It's just how can I get all this in the time we have to do it.
We all need time.
Yes.
Well, before we talk about this gigantic bone that is here on our set, I want you to tell us about this exciting dig that took place in southern Indiana. You found a 50,000-year-old pig skeleton. Give me a sense of the research and what it was like to find this.
Well, this is, we have been digging this cave for 26 years in southern Indiana and sort of unleashing its ice age history. And we've got remains of what we call the flat-headed peccary. It's like a wild boar. Today we find peccaries in the southwest, the javelina, and some down in South America. But in the ice age, they were throughout the Midwest. And they were about the size of a Doberman and very pig-like with really big, long, sharp teeth. And when we found this cave, we found a lot of them. We've continued to find them, but this last year, as we were digging down in some levels well below where we had radiocarbon data, we had some dated at 40, 45, 46,000 years old, and these are 4 feet lower, deeper, older in time, and we finally, for the first time, hit a fully articulated peccary skeleton. Normally we find pieces of skeletons and parts that have maybe washed from other parts of the cave or they've really been disturbed by other animals. But here we found a very complete one. And I was, at the time, it looked like it was routine in the cave. We're down in good clean sediments and I said, I'm going to go to the screens and work there. And you know, Braden, you and Michelle work here. And as soon as they got the screen, got out my gear on, then they say, hey, they've got something in the cave you need to see. You know, it's always like that, undoing all the gear. And when I went in, it was a pretty much an articulated skeleton. Every little bone was in place, including the kneecaps, all the small little bones under the feet. We call them the sesamoids. So it was very unusual.
I would think so, and I know this made the national news because this really was a big deal, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
So you talk about the Ice Age. So how old? I mentioned 50,000 years. The bones are that old. But just give me a little hint of the Ice Age. Refresh our memory.
Well, the Ice Age, this was a time, and technically it lasted until about 1.8 million years ago. Most of our deposits in Indiana are from the last 100,000 or more years old. But great ice sheets came from the north. And they moved big boulders throughout much of Indiana. They brought a lot of the dirt in central Indiana. All this came from the north. And when they kind of planed the land down, flattened it out, and it didn't reach the hills beyond Brown County. So southern Indiana doesn't have hills because the ice didn't really reach that far on the last sheets. It was cooler. There were ice sheets. It's not always freezing. It's not always tundra. There were times when it was warmer. And it left behind a pretty good record. A lot of it in northern Indiana, but some in southern Indiana, both in the caves and in these old lakes and bogs in northern Indiana.
So what should we do if we find a bone?
When you call us or call the university, we get calls all the time, and most of the time you might think it's a real big animal, but often it is a horse or a cow or something like that, and that's fine, because every year 1 or 2 people in Indiana will find the bone or a tooth of something big and extinct like the mammoth or the mastodon.
Well, that definitely sets us up
You
for the great exhibit that's taking place at the Indiana State Museum. Don't go away. When we come back, we'll tell you more about the Ice Age. Stay with us. Welcome back to Full Circle. Today we are talking about activities at the Indiana State Museum that you do not want to miss. I'm continuing my conversation with Ron Richards. Also joining us now, we have Damon Lowe. Damon is, I'll read it here, Chief Curator of Science and Technology. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
I know you're excited about this Ice Age Giants. Tell me all about this exhibit and why it's so special to the Indiana State Museum.
Well, we're really excited because it's going to be fun and engaging for the whole family, and there's a lot of interactivity for the kids to do, and it gets our whole message across about what the museum's been doing for the last 30 or plus years.
So let's jump back on those kind of 30 plus years. Give us a sense of what it's about, because it is an Indiana State Museum.
Sure. Well, it really highlights what the museum's been doing as far as digging in the Ice Age paleontology for since Ron came on. So, because he's our paleontologist, so he started digging in 1980, and he's been digging for 15 different sites, and he's really expanded the program and made it what it is today.
And I think that's important, because I know I was not aware that it's not just the Indiana State Museum on the canal downtown, but you do have all of these historic sites throughout the state of Indiana. What does that mean to you as a paleobiologist to have this opportunity to go to these various sites, Ron?
Well, of course, we're on our mastodon sites. They're also spread all over Indiana, just like our historic sites. We tend to have more of these up north. So it's, we started digging in 1980 up in Bass Lake, and that's where this big thigh bone is from a mastodon.
All right, tell me about this big bone, because it's obviously huge and it's real.
Okay, well, this is a maybe 40 pounds. It's the left femur, left thigh bone off a big male mastodon. A mastodon's like a big mammoth, a big Ice Age, tusked animal. And they're pretty common in Indiana, from my perspective, but the normal person might know about 1 or 2 that's been dug up. For the most part, most of our digs, and there have been about 14 or 15, where we send crews into the field for a couple weeks. For the most part, they have been donated by the owners when they encounter them. Not always, but 85% of the time. And for instance, the Caleric site here, that was donated to the museum to be preserved for the present, for the future generations, for science, for education. And that's almost always the pattern. Usually somebody's digging a recreational pond on their property, and they hit this big bone and like, oh, what have we done here? We've broken the law. What do we do? The phone call goes, normally it gets to us through the universities or through some other governmental agencies, and then we go make an assessment, and we tell them, these are your bones. You found them on your property. They're yours. What would you like to do? And they normally want to get involved with a big dig and bring out crews and see what it tells them about the past.
That's really exciting. So how do you preserve this bone?
Well, normally we will basically clean the bones. We get them back in the lab, dry them out very slowly over a month or 2, and some bones get resin in them. We soak them in this big tub of resin, dry them out, and do it 3 or 4 times, and it'll harden, preserve them, and of course some bones are not done. We save those for radiocarbon dates, for other kinds of tests. So, but most will have that kind of preservation. They can withstand this kind of mechanical handling of moving them around an exhibition and all that.
Sure. Well, you mentioned the exhibition. Let's jump back to some of the interactivity of the exhibition, Damon. I understand that there's an interactive dig that the kids and families can be involved in. Tell me a little bit more about that and why you felt it was so important to include that.
Well, like we said, Ron has actively dug 15 of these sites, and when we get the media out there and we bring school children out there, they're really fascinated by these sites. So we thought it'd be a really neat opportunity to recreate a site and give kids an opportunity to get in there and dig around in the dirt. It's not actually dirt because we can't have that in the museum, but to get in there and get a chance to feel like what it's like to discover one of these bones. So they become a paleontologist. They get the goggles and the brush, and they will uncover one of these bones, and then they're going to learn they'll get to learn the whole process, what happens to the bone after it's uncovered, the whole lab scenario and the whole science behind that, and then the whole exhibition part too, because we're one of the few places, we actually might be the only place in Indiana that can do the science of the whole dig, analysis, and exhibition, because that's quite an undertaking to do all of that. So
yeah, and it's a big exhibition, and it will run through August of 2014. We have a website here that you can get information about the Indiana State Museum, the Ice Age Giants, Mysteries of Mammoths and Mastodons, and again, we encourage you to go. But let's talk about the importance of it from a historical perspective, Ron, because what will this mean to future generations?
Well, a lot of our heritage goes by unpreserved. They don't get into museums. And there are probably 400 or 500 dots on the state of Indiana map where things have been found. We know where maybe 200 of them are. The rest of them just sort of disappeared into thin air. Indiana is one of the states that have probably more discoveries of mammoths and mastodons than any other state in this Great Lakes region here.
Why is that?
Just the way the geology was. I mean, the ice sheets came down at a certain time. Maybe we had the right climate for a longer period of time. I know that a lot of the Indiana sites are a little more recent than some of the other sites, so there's probably good habitat for a pretty long time.
So let's go back to this. How much does it weigh? You mentioned it was a thigh bone.
Yes.
So how tall was that animal?
This animal was probably about 9.5 feet, 9 or 9.5 feet at the shoulders, and it's several tons. It's just a big male. The tusk on this animal are 8-9 inches in diameter, and they're 8 feet long, and it's just a monster animal. And speaking of one thing we've done in this exhibit, we have what we call the Hall of Giants. And very often, when people see museum exhibits, they say, well, it's all cast, we don't see a lot of real bone. In the Hall of Giants, we're throwing a lot of real bone at people. We have big walls that are 20 feet long, 8 feet high, and many of them, sometimes filleting out a whole animal. We've got everything we found on the dig site in a relative position they can understand. So we have lots of bone, and we have many like this. Wow. I mean, they can it's just an immersion within bone. And I like that part of it a lot. I think they'll like it too.
Well, if you want to get immersed in bone, be sure and go to the Indiana State Museum. There are some smaller bones that are out here on the set. We're going to take a break, but when we come back, we'll tell you about those. Stay with us. We're continuing to talk about the Ice Age Giants, the mysteries of mammoths and mastodons, that's on exhibit at the Indiana State Museum. Okay, Damon, what's the difference between the mammoth and the mastodon?
Oh, well, there's a lot of differences, and you'll have to come to the exhibit to see. That's one of the big things that we're showcasing in the exhibition, is to learn the difference between mammoths and mastodons.
All right, so you're not going to tell us now. You've got to absolutely go down to the State Museum on the canal downtown. Well, we do have these others. I thought they were bones, that these are actually teeth. Tell me what this is, Ron.
You've got a mammoth tooth there. That is a lower molar tooth from a mammoth. And you can see the surface of that is like a file.
It is like a file.
And that's how these are used to sort of rasp and shear vegetation, primarily grasses.
This is one tooth, though.
That is one tooth. And so they're grazers, they eat grass, and that's one of the most efficient ways to deal with grass, to really make it into pulp, swallowable pulp.
I wouldn't want to have had a root canal with a tooth like this. Okay, this one's completely different than this one.
This is, and yet these all look like elephants. The mammoth is an elephant. The mastodon is not. It's a whole different family. There's differences between dogs and cats.
So what is this? That's another tooth.
This tooth, it's a very similar tooth. It's the third molar, and it has bumps on it. And these cones. This is how mammoths. They browse vegetation, so they're going to sort of crush and move sideways a little bit on the vegetation. We're talking about eating twigs, leaves, bark, some grass, but even softer vegetation too.
But they only ate vegetation?
All these are vegetarians. They're all
Wow.
vegetarians, even though they look like a big carnivore tooth. It's just they've got some rougher vegetation to deal with. And both found in Indiana, both at the same time. They lived in different places.
Wow, that's really incredible. So Damon, we're almost out of time. Briefly, again, tell me about this exciting exhibit at the Indiana State Museum.
Well, I touched on some of the interactive experiences, but there's a whole lot of others. You learn about their hearing, you learn about their tusks, you learn how to tell the difference between male and females, mammoths and mastodons. There's just a whole variety of things you learn about these giant creatures. So I encourage everybody to come on down and check it out.
And it's an absolutely beautiful facility. As I mentioned, it's on the canal in downtown Indianapolis. You can grab lunch, you can take a stroll out on the canal, and be sure and bring your family because this is a very exciting thing. So I want to thank both of our guests from the Indiana State Museum. I've been talking with Ron Richards, the Senior Research Curator of Paleobiology, also Damon Lowe, Chief Curator of Science and Technology. Gentlemen, thanks again for being here.
Thank you for having us.
And once again, we have that information up on the screen so that you can find out all the details before you head to the Indiana State Museum. Well, stay with us. We have our music after this.
Musical Showcase is brought to you by Flanner and Buchanan, helping families tell the story of their loved one's life. Musical Showcase is brought to you by Flanner and Buchanan, helping families tell the story of their loved one's life.
Welcome back to Full Circle. Well, I want to tell you that one of the most memorable trips that my husband and I took was to Venice, Italy, and we went for a ride on a gondola. But you know, all you have to do is go to downtown Indianapolis to the canal, and you too can go on a ride on a gondola and have a gondolier sing to you. Jeff Hudson is a gondolier, and he joins us today. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I am fine. Tell me about the career of a gondolier.
Well, there are very few of us, about 50 singing gondoliers in the world, and maybe about 600 gondoliers in the world. Most of them don't sing anymore, but we try to keep this art form alive here in Indianapolis.
Well, and that's exactly what you're doing, and I'm sure people are so thrilled to have the chance to experience that in a real gondola.
It is really fun. It's a great attraction, and it's something unique and different for Indianapolis. You can bring your own wine, champagne, or food, and people come for birthdays, anniversaries, celebrations. We're always with people celebrating.
And we're going to put the information up on the screen so that people can reach out to you. Now, I notice on your shirt it says Goffredo.
Yes, that's my name in Italian. Jeff in Italian is Goffredo. And we all play our Italian heritage at the gondola ride. And so we take you on a journey, a fantasy ride. It's really fun, though.
Well, that's exactly what it is, a journey. So tell us about the compilation of songs that you're going to perform for us.
Today I'm going to sing a song that was made famous on gondolas by Elvis Presley, O Sole Mio. Never had anything to do with gondolas or Venice, but it is the most requested song. So I'm going to sing O Sole Mio because everybody associates that with gondolas. And then I'm going to sing Non ti scordar di me, which is Forget Me Not.
All right, well, here is Jeff Hudson performing for you. I'm Suzanne McAllister on behalf of all of us here at LaCie Broadcasting. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time, Full Circle.
Che bella cosa, una giornata al sole, un'aria serena, dopo una tempesta, per l'aria fresca, para odiar na festa. Que bela cosa na giornata e sole. Mamma du sole, più bello è ne. O sole mio, stan fronte a te. O sole mio, stan fronte a te, stan fronte a te. Mamma tu sole, più bello è ne. O sole mio, stan fronte a te. O sole mio, stan fronte a te, stan fronte a te. Non ti scordar di me, la vita mia legati a te. Io t'amo sempre più, nel sogno mio nomani tu. Non ti scordar di me, la vita mia legati a te, che sempre ogni donna nel mio cuore per te. Non ti scordar di me.
Closed captioning provided by Hear Hear. Hear Hear, discrete hearing solutions at affordable prices. 317-731-5386.